welcome to the second QPR Preview Show of the season. It's not even the middle of August yet, and it feels like it's going to be a long old season for QPR. And it's a double match week this week as we have the trip to Cardiff, and then if the pitch at Loftus Road is finally ready, we have to entertain Norwich in the League Cup. We'll preview those shortly, but of course, this week's show will be dominated by last Saturday. The preview of this week's matches has to primarily focus really on how we recover from a miserable but entirely predictable 4-0 humbling at Watford. QPR start the season rock bottom. We have to start picking the bones out of that, Dave. What went wrong?
Well, I wasn't expecting much, and it was even worse than I thought it was going to be. I mean, from the kickoff, we set the tone. We give the ball away within 3 seconds of kicking off, just trying to lump a ball down the line and give it away, and then score within 30 seconds. And we might as well have gone home from there. I've just never seen. I mean, I've been going a long time. I'm struggling to remember a worse opening day performance. I know we lost. I was coming through them this morning. We lost 5-0 to Swansea, who was in the Premier League, but even that wasn't as bad as this. We had moments in that game. This was just awful. You just looked at, there was so much wrong with it. I think from the way Ainsworth set them up to the attitude of the players, it was just absolutely diabolical. And I mean, I was pessimistic last week. I mean, I'm through the floor now. I'll be happy to see us get a point this season now.
Yeah, and do you know what? The thing that was most alarming to me was the fact that they were in cruise control in the second half, weren't they? And that's been kind of used to gloss over it a little bit. Oh, we improved in the second half. But for me, we didn't. They could have still won the match 10-0, and they were in first gear the second half and still were having chance after chance. Begovic was in the EFL team of the week, wasn't he? Which just about summed up our performance. There's just so much we can say about it. And I want to try and keep the show short, but I've got a little bit of a rant coming here. Because Ainsworth said last week after the Oxford pre-season defeat, I've learned so much. It told me a lot about these boys. We'll right the wrongs, etc., etc., etc. Now, surely to God, given our limitations right now, given the defence was in tatters, had never played together, Fox was making his debut, Gubbins so young making his first start, you tell them to keep the game compact and tight. Surely you tell Dozzell and Field to just sit in front of the defence, but they were being pulled here, there, and everywhere, chasing shadows. It just came across to me that they had no plan whatsoever. So I'd love to know what Ainsworth told them to do after Oxford, because to only last then 30 seconds before we conceded spoke volumes. And I went back to find an image that you can see here, and I was moaning to my dad, who we were watching the match at the time, and I said, this is only 8 minutes in. Remember, we were already 1-0 down. They do one pass between Chair and Kelman, and their guy literally has the freedom of Vicarage Road. He's got half of our half to himself. Field I've circled there. God knows where he's gone. Then you've got picture 2. So just a few seconds later, and it shows Dozzell tracks his man. Watford are forced to pass wide. But our 2 central midfielders there are as deep as the back line. We had no shape. We actually had no central midfield whatsoever. On that occasion, Begovic made a save, but you can see our shape is nowhere. That could have been 2-0, but we learnt nothing because nobody's taken it upon themselves and thought, let's tighten this up, let's play with some discipline. The manager clearly doesn't tell them to change anything because, of course, 10 minutes later, picture 3, we've got Dykes just stood pointing at their guy in space. Cheers for that, Lyndon. We have 8 men behind the ball. Field is further towards the touchline than Pal, but still nowhere near anybody in a yellow shirt. Dozzell, you can't see him on the image, but he's chased his man back to the penalty spot. They score, it's game over. It is just amateur. And Dave, the question for you is, what was the plan? Because do you have any idea from that how Ainsworth thought that his setup and his plan for this game was going to get us anything from a trip to Watford?
The whole setup staggered me. When the teams come, we was in the pub before the game, and the teams come through everyone's phone, and everyone was like, can you believe it? And everyone was like talking, like no one could believe the team we'd put out. We had a blueprint for this game. We haven't won many games under Ainsworth, but we did beat Watford in March. It's not that long ago. And we had a blueprint for it. We played a back 3 that day. Field play centre half. We were very compact. We were right in their face from the first second of that game. We were in Watford's face, and they did not fancy it one bit. And we worked our way through the game. I thought we'd do something similar, but it was madness. I mean, they've known since June we were playing this game. How do you come up with this scenario where you play? I felt bad for Kelman. He's been on loan in the lower leagues. He's been put in as a 2 up front. You've got two in midfield who just they haven't got the pace to get to people to close them down. They were just exposed the whole game. You had a young centre half. I mean, I just felt for him. He had no protection at all. It was he played with two wingers. Chair looked like he didn't have a clue how to play left wing. He was lost. I felt sorry for Smith. He didn't look anywhere near fit. It was awful. It's one of the worst setups I've ever seen from a team. It's like you've had over a month to plan for this game. You know, we know we're not very good. We know that you look at the players we've got. It's not a great team. It's a League One team. We've got to be honest. But come up with a plan to stop the opposition, especially after you lost. How many was it? 5 we lost to Oxford the other week. I will lose track of it. But you know, come up with a plan to stop things, and we did nothing. We were pulled apart all half. And you were right when you said it could have been 10. I thought 4-0 flattered us at half time. We were lucky it was only 4. And if they'd have kept going, Watford, they could have got another 4 or 5. And even when they took their foot off the gas, they could have scored 3 second half. You know, we said it was an improved second half from us, but you know, we didn't do anything, did we? Really, we just didn't concede anymore. That's the only improvement, to be honest.
Literally.
It was just absolutely abysmal. I thought it was. I can't find all the words to say without swearing. I'm going to try not to swear.
Yeah, it is hard to put it into words, and you're right there. I mean, Kelman, Gubbins, Dazelle, they all got a lot of stick, but to me, they were no worse than anyone else. The whole team was a shambles apart from Begovic. It's just alarm bells for what to come. And the only reason I highlighted it there with those images is because to me, it was just showing that nobody on the pitch or off the pitch was taking charge of the situation and trying to do anything about it. Shows we've got no leaders on the pitch still. Maybe that's going to change as we move forward with the transfer window. But I still feel like the manager should have been doing something, even though it's hard to change a team after a few minutes, but it's there in front of you. You can see what's happening. Change something.
There was a break in play after about 10, 15. It was only 1-0. There was that one of their players got a head injury. And you just think, right, we've been rubbish the first 15 minutes. Let's sort this out. All the Watford players run over to their bench. I clearly remember seeing it. And he was organising them all and doing it. Ainsworth was just stood there. Our players were having chats all over the pitch. It's like, come on, this is your chance to sort something out. Rejig it. This isn't working. Change the midfield to a diamond. Do something. They just did nothing. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. It, beggared belief.
Yeah, it's case in point of what I'm saying. To me, someone should be saying, I'm just going to sit here. We're getting battered. I'm just going to stay in the middle, make it a little bit hard for them, make them go wide, because you can defend crosses a lot easier than you can defend a team having men literally running straight through the middle of the pitch, like I showed before. Let's move on to Cardiff before the blood pressure gets too high, I think. It's already a match, though, that feels like quite a big match, and it's not going to be easy away from home again, of course. We've only lost 1 of the last 7 against Cardiff, but we had similarly good stats against Watford last week, and look how that ended. Not lost in Cardiff for 4 years either. Most pre-season predictions had both QPR and Cardiff as teams set to struggle, but they did well away at Leeds last week, probably should have won. It's their first home league match of the season. They're just going to cause us problems and be well up for it, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I thought they'd struggle, and I still think they might struggle this year, but I was impressed with them against Leeds. I mean, they were a million times better than what we were. I thought they looked quite dangerous up front. They got some decent forward players. So, this is the sort of game, realistically, you've got a target to win. If we're not targeting these sort of games, who are we going to beat? But, I mean, I don't fancy us one bit. I mean, they look very sharp. I mean, it was Leeds away as well. It's not necessarily an easy game for them to start with. They're playing a team just out of the Premier League with a lot of Premier League players, and they more than competed and probably should have won the game. So, yeah, I'm not overly promising, to be honest, is it?
No, they're going to be relishing us coming to town, aren't they? And they had a plan against Leeds. It's more than can be said for us. And of course, Josh Bowler is there on loan. He seems to love playing against us. He's got to be the tip for first scorer, hasn't he, this week?
Yeah, you'd think so. I was actually looking this morning about first goals we concede. So last week was the first minute again. I had a look. I looked at the numbers. Ainsworth he's managed 14 games for us now. It's not that many, but it's a few. We've conceded in the first 15 minutes 8 times of those 14, and the first 6 minutes 4 times. I just think that's incredible. So if we're going to have any chance, if we can last 10 minutes, 20 minutes without conceding, we might have a chance. But with the lack of goals we've got in this team, you can't keep conceding goals in the first. Well, no one can keep conceding in the first minute, but we just always concede the first goal, and yet we're not good enough to score 2 goals in a game, let alone 3, 4. It's a big concern.
That's an amazing stat. And do you know what? We talk a lot about how the team seems to have like mental fragility. If they concede in the first goal, those games are basically over, aren't they? Because
Mm.
we don't respond well. We saw even an injury to Jimmy Dunn last week, and they seem to be a spent force. So we've got to turn that around, and hopefully they're as aware of that stat as you are, because it's things like that that they need to be telling the players to try and right the wrongs. From a QPR's perspective, as we sit here now, it looks like maybe a move for Steve Cook and potentially a right back could be happening before the Cardiff game, but they seem to be relying now, and don't they, on sports science to tell you when a player is fit and ready. Colback wasn't even deemed fit enough to be on the bench last week, so you have to think that even if Steve Cook does join, he's probably not going to be thrown in anyway, and makes you think surely they can't play that same defence again, can you?
I think he might. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, I find it incredible we've got to this stage and we haven't bought a centre half. It hasn't taken a major injury crisis to get to this point, has it? Clarkson was always injured, and one injury to Dunn, and look at us. And yeah. I mean, if they do sign Cook, which it looks like they might do, he's got to go straight in. Whether the sports scientists say he should have 2 weeks or not, we need to get results. Can't mess around here, because before you know it, we're going to be like 6, 7 games in the season, potentially without a win. You look at the games coming up after Cardiff; they're not going to get easier. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to see I think Colback has to start. I mean, I know he hasn't played much, but Paul Smith hadn't hardly played us all pre-season, and they threw him in last week. I think they need to get these people in the team.
Yeah, I agree. I think if Cook does sign, he has to start, but it just made me think he probably won't because of Colback last week not even being on the bench. But then you wonder if he overrides the sports scientists and says he's playing, why have we then put loads of our budget into having these people there? It's just backed ourselves into a corner a little bit, haven't we? For us as well, it's broken record time, but Sinclair Armstrong, we say it all the time, but he's on the pitch, he causes problems. Teams clearly hate playing against him. Watford were 4-0 up, but we're still struggling against him. Do you think he can find a place in the team for him?
I think he's got to really, isn't he? I mean, he just puts himself about. He's not the greatest player in the world, but he just looked like he cared and that the result was affecting him last week. Like last week, we had an attack a rare attack in the second half, and their goalkeeper just decided to sit on the floor and say he was injured. And Armstrong was having none of it. The referee stopped the game. He was in the referee's face. He was in the keeper's face. He took the keeper out 2 minutes later and got booked for it. But it's not the wisest thing to do, but at least to show you had something about him. Whilst all the others just stood there like, oh, well, here we go again. I'd like to see him get a run. There's a few players I'd like to see get a run in the side. I think if he had a run where he played 5, 10 games in a row, I think the goals would come and, he'd get better for it. But I mean, we know last year he had a lot of trouble with injuries. He seemed to be unable to play 2 in a row, did he?
No. I'd like to see him start as well, but I just think he sees him as an impact sub. But then the issue with that is there's no point being an impact sub if the game's already gone, isn't it? So
Yeah.
we'll see what he does there. Other talking point, obviously, was Richards and Willett were dropped after their performances against Oxford. Now, that was the right thing to do. I agree with Ainsworth there. He has to send that message that if you perform like that, you're not going to be playing for QPR. But then he brought Willock on, didn't he? 96th minute. What was all that about? And does it give you any insight into maybe some relations behind the scenes aren't what we would like to see?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I get him dropping those 2 after the Oxford game, but bringing him on with on the 93rd, 94th minute when you're 4-0 down. I mean, it was like, come on, mate, what are you doing? We need Willock on side. I mean, a year ago we were sat here and saying you couldn't win a game without Chris Willock in your team. Now he can't even get in the team. I mean, look, I think he started 2 games under Ainsworth since he took over. Willock is still one of our best players, and you need to try and get the best out of him somehow, or they need to sell him. And the only way they're going to sell him is if he starts playing and does well. I find it all odd, and I just thought that was a bit weird the way he brought him on with a minute or 2 to go last week. I thought it was, taking the mickey out of him, really. I can't see that going down well with Willock. It didn't sit right with me, that.
No, just leave him out, fair enough, but then just don't play him in that game. It just didn't make sense. And you worry then that other players are going to think, what's he doing there? And side with Willock, and then he's losing the dressing room, or it was a strange one to do. Let's have a brief look ahead to the midweek cup tie against Norwich. We've said both before that we hate that the way the cups are just tossed aside by clubs. Some of the most memorable nights in recent seasons have been like the night at Orient beating Everton 2 years ago. That being said, with how things are looking right now, I can't see it being a priority this season, can you?
Probably not, but winning a game of football should be a priority to them, and that's an opportunity to. You would think Norwich will probably rest a lot of players, like most teams do. So maybe try and win it, try and win again, try and get a bit of confidence going. I've no doubt we'll do what we always do in the cup, and we'll leave all the first teamers out, and be shocked that we've lost again. But what gets me with the cup is you've seen this summer where we are with financial fair play and how we're struggling for money. Have a cup run. Try and win a few cup games, because you get prize money, you get TV money. The further you might land Man United away in 2 rounds' time. You could get a big bit of money, but every year we just toss the cups away and go, oh no, we're too good for that. We'd rather not play. I find it odd. And unfortunately, I imagine we'll do the same again next Wednesday.
Yeah, I agree with you on both counts. I think they should be trying to win it because we need confidence. The players need to maybe get some goals, just give them any kind of boost they can. But because we are so light as a squad, I think he's going to make quite a few changes. I think we'll see the likes of Archer, Drew, Larkesh, Duke McKenna, Dixon Bonner. I think they're all going to get game time. Maybe that'll work, but you suspect it could be a tough night. But you're right about the FFP as well. We could get through in the next round. You could get like Crystal Palace or someone who comes in at home. That'd be like a sellout crowd for them, wouldn't it? Playing Eze again, etc.
Yeah.
I don't know why they think about cups the way they do. Prediction time then to finish on. Let's start with Saturday and the trip to Cardiff. You think things are going to get worse this weekend?
Yeah, I just can't see where a win's coming from. You never know. They Ainsworth pulled out a rabbit out when we beat Burnley last year, but I just can't see. I think Cardiff will have first home game, they'll be up for it. I think they'll beat us comfortably 2 or 3-0.
I agree. I think they're going to score at least 2 or 3, and I can't see us scoring 2 or 3. And you think that's what we're going to need to score just to get maybe even a draw out of the game. If the defence doesn't change, that defence does not win games at this level. It just won't, unfortunately. And then prediction for the cup. I mean, depending on that Cardiff result, the Norwich Cup tie could actually be quite interesting, because if we lost big again, coming to a home crowd, it could be a tense atmosphere. But does the League Cup one end in August, do you think?
Well, it normally does, doesn't it? I mean, I hope he plays a strong side, but I suspect he won't. I mean, our strong side's not very good, so God knows what the reserves are like. But yeah, I can't see us. I think we'll go out early as we normally do. Unfortunately, it's a bit pessimistic for me again this week.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it, that if we do get knocked out, because I just agree with what you said before about a win in the cup. It could still help to change the whole vibe around the club. It doesn't matter whether it's in the cup. It would help improve the atmosphere of the fans, the players. Everything would be in a better place just from one win. Maybe we'll get that on Saturday. Who knows? But whatever happens, we're going to be here again next week to preview the first home league match of the campaign. That's against Ipswich. Thank you as always for watching, commenting. We've had lots of comments recently. Thank you for those. Thanks for subscribing. It's much appreciated. We'll see you next week, and come on, you R's.
We know who we are. You know who we are. We are QPR.